tonight we're going to talk about the beautiful and the ugly, the eye of the beholder. We're going to try to get to two particular aspects of that topic. We're going to go for the practical aspects, and we're also going to look at the theoretical aspects. So if I ask you to think about what's beautiful or what's ugly, my guess is you have an image in your mind already. But if I were to ask you, what is the beautiful, capital B, or what is the ugly? My guess, my surmise, is that you're going to have a little bit of harder time with a definition. So what I want to talk about a little bit is about what we think about as beauty. This is a picture of a woman who was created in 1993. She actually doesn't exist, but she has the perfect face. She is a recipe of different ethnicities. She's got some Asian in her, she has a little bit of black, a whole lot of white. She has a little bit of probably Sfard, maybe a little Filipino, probably very little indigenous peoples. And she doesn't exist. But her face is considered perfect. Now I'm going to say the researchers were men, so it might be slightly biased. But she is considered beautiful. And we know what ugly is. You can just get the Ugly Meter app from there on your iPhone. And what it'll do is it'll take a picture of your face and it will tell you whether you're ugly or tell you how ugly you are, right? And part of what that's doing is it's measuring the proportionality of your face. I don't know what it costs, but there's a pro version if you're really excited. So we have the beautiful, we have ugly. How do we know what's beautiful or what's ugly? Some of that has to do with the way that we measure our faces. As I said, there's actually a proportionality. There's something called the golden ratio. Some researchers about 7 years ago created this model by which we're able to judge who's beautiful and who's ugly. Turns out that the perfect ratio is the vertical distance between the eyes and the mouth is 36% of facial length. And the horizontal distance between the eyes is 46% of facial width. So the proportionality of your face is going to determine the golden ratio of your beauty. Right? And there's actually quite a few studies economists and sociologists have done about the benefits, the literal benefits of being beautiful or being ugly. And something called the plainness penalty. It's found that there's a 9% earning deficit if you are perceived as less attractive than your peers. And in the aptly named beauty premium, there's a 5% bump if you're seen as attractive. So say you're not an assistant professor and your starting salary is about $85,000. That's about $12,000 between pretty and ugly. Something to think about. There's also some other studies that show a bias against people who are overweight, particularly women, and a bias toward people who are tall. In a particular study, it's found that each inch represents 1.8% increase in salary. That's among adult white men in the US, which, I guess is a little bit better than if you're in Great Britain, which is 2.2%. So let's say you're 6 foot, you could make $5,500 more than someone who's 5'5". So some people say that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? Or that beauty is skin deep. But we have some empirical evidence to show us that really beauty or ugliness can matter. All of this discrimination against less attractive, less thin, less tall people actually has a name that's been found in the Oxford English Dictionary. It's called lookism, and it is really the bias based on someone's appearance. Not this crowd, I'm sure you've never faced it. Okay. Now I'm going to say lookism, you might think doesn't bode that well for the Jews. But you'd be actually surprised. These kinds of caricatures, they don't show up really until the 19th century. Most people assume that non-Jews have perceived Jews as ugly or as uglier. But that's a historical reality really from the modern age. And there is a long history of beauty and ugliness in Judaism. So if we think about who's hot in the Bible? We got a lot of beauties in the Bible. The first good-looking person is actually Sarah. She's gorgeous. She almost starts 2 wars. The second is Rebecca. She's so beautiful. She's instantly betrothed to Abraham's son. Rachel, also gorgeous. Her son Joseph, whose good looks starts the entire drama that ends up in the Exodus from Egypt. Remember, it's Potiphar's wife, his owner/employer's wife, is so attracted to Joseph, she throws herself at him. He rejects her. She claims an assault. He's thrown into jail. Next thing you know, he's telling dreams and interpreting dreams. And the whole famine situation, remember, the Israelites moved to Goshen. And then 400 years later, we have a Pharaoh who doesn't remember Joseph. The whole thing starts because he happens to be good looking. David is good looking. Abigail is good looking. We have enough people who are hot in the Bible that the rabbis in the Talmud spend some time talking about who's the most beautiful. They have a list of 4 who they think is very beautiful. Esther for some people, it's the Talmud, so Vashti for others. And there's also a separate list for who's the sexiest. Subject for a different talk on a different day. It's not just female beauty that the rabbis are interested in. There's also a conversation about male beauty. The most beautiful man is considered Adam, and that's because he is the closest approximation of God's image, right, as the first person created. There's a rabbi, however, who is considered the most beautiful man in his generation. That's Rabbi Yochanan. And he was so good looking. He used to sit by the mikveh, so that women who had just finished purifying themselves and they're on their way home to get lucky with their husbands would have his face in mind when they conceived, so that their children would be as good looking as he is. Takes a lot of self-confidence. There's this long tradition, right, within Judaism that has ideas about beauty and ugliness, despite our perception that there's been an avoidance of both because of the prohibition of the graven image in the second commandment. But actually, we have blessings for beauty and for ugly. So here's the first one. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of the world, who has seen such in his universe. Here's the second. Blessed are you, God, sovereign of the world, who makes creatures differently or who has such variety in creation. It's actually difficult a little bit to think which one is which. They both bless God, and neither has anything negative in them. Turns out the top one is for beautiful, the bottom one is for ugly. So anytime you encounter someone who's particularly beautiful or who's particularly ugly, here are your brachot. When I say what the beautiful is, it's a question of what the capital B term beautiful means, right? So when I talk about the beautiful, what do I mean? Philosophically speaking, beauty is defined as symmetry, as balance, as harmony, as a correspondence between the inside and the outside. There's a sense that things go together. And the ugly is the opposite, right? Disharmony, imbalance, asymmetry, some sort of deformity, an unhappy relationship between content and context. The beautiful has regularity and uniformity. The ugly does not, right? It's irregular. The thing about the beautiful is that it does inspire a feeling in us. But that's it. It's kind of boring. Once you're done with it, it's just regular, right? It has exact balance on both sides. You think, but you don't think too far. The rest of my talk, I'm going to redeem the ugly. The whole goal is to tell you how the ugly is better than the beautiful. I'm a big fan of the ugly. Why? The ugly makes you think. The ugly requires you to think more about what the parts are and what is off. So you think about what is ugliness. It can be something that's dying or decaying. What's beautiful? Maybe it's a flower. When does a flower smell the best? When it's dying. When it's actually at its most poignant, its most meaningful, when it's no longer perfect. when it's no longer in the ground, but when it's actually giving off its scent. The thing about ugly is it makes you think more. And the more you think, the more you exercise your mind, the greater the connections are that you can make. Because your brain is like a muscle, right? The more you're thinking, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the greater you're able to think. The ugly stretches your mind in a way that the beautiful doesn't. You all have a reaction to Medusa. This looks like a nice scene. So let's think about there's a German philosopher named Moses Mendelssohn in the 18th century. The way that he describes the ugly is through something called the mixed sentiment. That's the idea that two disparate emotions come together in one event. So think of a tragic play, for instance, or a dramedy. Or you can think about your favorite tearjerker. People pay good money to go and have a good cry. Right? Think about why you go to any of these movies or why you see them again. You want to go and you want to root for the hero and you want to hate the villain and you want to weep like a baby when the good guy dies. I'm sorry, it always ends that way. I hope it's not a spoiler. Any of these films require you, ask of you, allow you to have more than one emotion, laughing and crying, hatred and love, dislike and attraction. And the more that you feel, the greater the benefit is, right? The mixed sentiment allows you to have a greater expression. Think about what this portrait is doing, right? It's a beautiful portrait of men dying. It's a ship sinking in a storm. And at the same moment that you're looking at it, you imagine the bravery of the sailors rowing out. You imagine the horror of the storm, and you admire the artistry of the artist. The whole experience gives you more than just what the beautiful does. But greater than the beautiful and the ugly is the sublime. And the sublime is that which overcomes all emotion. Remember, the beautiful is uniformity and balance. The ugly is irregularity and disharmony. The sublime is neither of those things because it overwhelms you. So think for a second of the biggest thing you can imagine. Maybe it's the Grand Canyon. Or maybe it's watching someone giving birth. Maybe it was a car accident. The thing that doesn't allow you to have any sensory perceptions whatsoever. It's that moment of the sublime that overwhelms you, that allows you to expand your experience, because the moment after the sublime allows you to categorize it. The thing that is the greatest sublime thing in the world is God. Because God can't be categorized. God is neither harmony nor imbalance. God is greater than these ideas. And for Judaism, the most sublime moment is the revelation at Mount Sinai. Think about it for a second. I know you have it in your heads. I'm sure you have Exodus memorized. What's happening at the moment of revelation? The mountain is shaking, the shofarot are blowing, there's thunder, there's lightning, everything's happening. It's this moment that completely causes a shudder. It's an overwhelming of the senses. And that moment passes. What happens next? The giving of the regularity of the commandments. And that allows these ethical components of the beautiful and the ugly, because the sublime has expanded one's consciousness to allow for these moments. So, I'm going to wrap this up. When you're thinking about the beautiful and the ugly, when you sit in services in a couple of weeks, and I know you will, because the parade of people walking by you is going to not allow for any other thought. Do us all a little favor. These are the days of awe, right? You don't want to do too much repentance on Yom Kippur. Think about the ideas of the beautiful and the ugly. And when the shofar blows, see if you can reach towards the sublime. Thank you.